Hello, my name is Evgeny and I'm a founder coach. The reason I'm here is because I just released the book Startup CEO Succession, and I'm very much looking forward to talking about it.
Brilliant. Evgeny, you were guest number one on the show a number of years ago when you were the CEO at Makers Academy, which then became Makers. It was a fantastic first episode. So some people might not have gone back to the beginning of the 300 episode catalog that is now Mind Your Effing Business. And I was just so drawn to the business that you'd built, a sales team without commission, really purpose driven, taking people in their mid-20s on a career change into software development. It was just a fabulous business. Where's that business got to now?
Now the business is, first of all, run by a new chief executive. So now the company is run by Claudia Harris, who replaced me as a CEO 4 years ago. And a lot of things have changed and a lot of things have stayed the same. For example, today Claudia runs our sales team in a much more traditional way with commissions and all the usual things. But the purpose element remains. We are as purpose-driven as we've ever been, and it's incredibly important to the business.
Do the team still set their own salaries?
No, not anymore.
In my mind, I still have this conversation, I can't remember whether it was a conversation we had in the show or separately, but the fact that there were some people on the team who you thought were probably underpaid, but that they just couldn't be bothered to do the admin, they sort of set their own salary and give themselves a pay rise. Oh, no. So, but if people are interested in sales teams not earning commission and employees setting their own salary, then episode 1 conversation between Evgeny and I is great. And the resources that you created are still online because I shared them with somebody recently. So fab. And so the salaries are now set in a more traditional way as well?
In a much more traditional way, and it works better this way. We experimented a lot with empowering the team to choose how much they are paying themselves. And it worked in many ways, but ultimately the overhead of running it was just not worth the benefits.
So I'm intrigued, and I know we're going back to the beginning, but I'm intrigued because I was fascinated by the idea of employees setting their own salaries. And when you said, oh, well, we're doing it in a more traditional way now because there was sort of an unexpected overhead that outweighed the benefit. I'm intrigued.
So the admin overhead is that in order to choose the salary, someone needs to think about what's appropriate. It's not as simple as just picking a number out of thin air. You need to look at the market, at the skills, at the contribution performance over the last year. So do all the work that managers normally do. And what we used to do many years ago is we used to effectively ask every employee to do what their manager would normally be asked to do. And this works okay for people who have the skill, but not everyone does it, especially more junior people. And so for them, it became quite a significant exercise, which was just not always easy and not always fair to them. But another problem with the process was that it's next to impossible to ensure equality of pay if the system is decentralized. When people take individual decisions about how they should be compensated, you absolutely inevitably end up with a situation in which people are paid different amounts for the same roles. And quite inevitably, we realized when we looked at the data that men were paying themselves slightly more than women. And surprise, surprise. And so we decided to address all of this by moving to a more traditional approach.
So it's fascinating, the unintended consequences. And did you think, is it a scale issue? Do you think people setting their own salaries works up to like 10 or 20 or would you just not recommend people do it at all?
I wouldn't recommend it at all. It's usually when people hear that we moved away from it, the assumption is that it was something about trust, that someone was abusing the system or people were paying themselves too much or something like this. It was not the case at all. It's just more complex for everyone to run than just the more traditional top-down system. What what people need is good management, not a sophisticated system that only a tiny proportion of companies use day to day.
Marvelous. I think that's good to emphasize that it's not an issue of trust. So you've written a book. What hole in the bookshelf does it fill?
So the book, and here's the book, Startup CEO Succession. The book is all about two questions. Should I step down as a founder CEO of my own startup? And if so, how do I do it? And the reason I wrote the book is that no one really talks about it. There is an unwritten assumption that a founder CEO is going to stay in their role until the company either fails or becomes a global empire or is sold. But a CEO succession in the middle is often seen as some kind of a problem. And the argument I'm making in the book is that often it's the best thing that can happen both for the founder and for the company. And the reason for this is that the role of a founder and the role of a CEO evolves quite a lot as the company goes from an idea to a sizable organization. Some people can be incredible as founders. They take the company from an idea to something that works. They validate assumptions, find product market fit, build the initial team, and then the job is to run a functional scaling organization. And that's a different job, and they might not want to do it. And even if they want to do it, they might not be really good at it. And some people are great at running functional scaling organizations, but they don't know how to thrive at an early stage, messy stage, when everything changes every time and you need to move really, really fast to survive. And often founders assume that they've got to go all the way from an idea to running global empire like Mark Zuckerberg or Jeff Bezos. But what often is the right thing to do is to ask from time to time, maybe every 2-3 years, is what kind of a CEO does the company need for the next 5-10 years? And am I still the best person? And if not, who would be the best person to run the business? This is not to say that every founder CEO should step down. Absolutely not. For many people, the right thing to do is to run the company for as long as they would like to. But my argument is that it's a question worth asking and worth discussing at the board level.
Yes, and if you look at the Jimmy Allen at Bain & Co.'s written very eloquently and spoken eloquently about the founder's mentality. And from Bain's perspective, they don't want the founders to exit the business because they bring a special energy, which is the antidote to bureaucracy and bullshit. As you were talking about what type of CEO does the company need, I was thinking there's a skill mix that the company needs. And so you could so sometimes I see the individual who's in the chair is unaware of that change, the change that's required. And sometimes they're aware of it, but they can't make the change. And other times they're aware of the change that they would need, the growth that they would need, or the skills that they would need, or the people they would need to hire them around them. And there's a level of awareness, and there's a level of, if this would require me to change, am I prepared to change? As well. And why does it not get talked about, do you think?
It's a scary topic for everyone. Founders are afraid that if they raise the question, it will be a one-way conversation, that they will signal that they are not absolutely committed, and then the investors are going to fire them. Investors are afraid of raising this question because they don't want to give an impression that they are trying to push the founder out. They're afraid that the founder is going to think, oh my God, my investors don't trust me, they're about to fire me, and then the relationship breaks down. So as the result, neither investors nor founders talk about it until they absolutely have to. And by the time they absolutely have to talk about it, it's a bit too late.
Yes, because that is at the point where it's sort of goodbye, thank you very much, you're out. And everybody falls out. Whereas what you're saying is bring it up as a conversation early. It means that everybody can have a plan, and either the CEO is still the CEO and they've built an incredible team and they're doing work that they really, enjoy and are the best in the world at. Either they've exited the business or they've got another role in the business, which it's that transitioning from CEO to another role at the point where they've broken down all of the relationships that gets really impossible. I know, at Rackspace, the 3 founders of the business that became Rackspace were still there, and for the 5 or 6 years that I was there, they were still there doing other roles in the business because the transition had been managed well.
Yeah. And that's another really important point. Founders often think about stepping down as CEOs as a binary event. Either they're running the company as a CEO, or they leave and disappear and they've got nothing to do with the company. In reality, there are lots of options in the middle. Founders can stay full-time as members of the senior team, for example, taking a CXO role, like a CTO or a COO. They can move into an executive chair position. They can remain as an advisor or as a consultant. There are plenty of ways to make sure that the founder stays around and contributes their creativity, their vision, their expertise, while trusting running the company to someone else. And then there are other creative solutions along the lines of some founders I interviewed for the book, instead of stepping down, which felt impossible, chose to return the money to investors. And then they renegotiated the cap table, effectively removing investors from the cap table and staying with the business and taking it in a new direction.
Uh-huh.
Another founder created a group CEO role for himself. So instead of leaving the business, he created a group structure that gave him a different remit. So my point is that there are plenty of options, and it's not nearly as binary as either I'm a CEO or I'm out of the picture. There are plenty of options in the middle.
I've had conversations with CEO founders where they have literally been in tears on a call with me, just saying, I know I can't do this job and I hate it. And so I asked them what this job is. And the other thing is that transition from sort of founder CEO into scale up, because they were doing all of the work, it hasn't occurred to them that over here, they don't need to do all the work, right? That whole, get yourself an executive assistant, have a chief of staff, have a COO, even thinking about that administrative piece, the day-to-day operational excellence. Look, if that's not what you're great at, don't do it. Steve Jobs had the job title CEO, but Tim Cook ran the company. You don't. So there's even people get confused about what is the job of the CEO and what needs to be in there. It's a job title. You can leave in anything and you can take out anything. All of that's completely flexible as well.
Yes, it's very flexible. And this also makes me think that often when I work with founders, I ask them, what is your job? How do you understand your job in your company today? And what does it mean to do it well? And more often than not, founders don't have a clear answer to this question. They feel like, well, I'm in charge and I'm responsible for everything. And then, of course, no wonder that you feel overwhelmed and you're working 60 hours a week. You're absolutely right. It's important to have a clear idea of what is my job, what does it mean to do it well, and how does it need to change as the company grows.
How many founders did you interview?
Several dozen.
Can we dig into some of those stories? I think that would be great.
Yeah.
Just whichever one sort of bounced to the top of your mind and you think we should dive in and chat through. There'll be some common themes and there'll be some edge cases.
So one CEO succession that I highlight in the book is the succession of Jeff Lynne, who was the founding CEO at Seedrs, a crowdfunding marketplace in the UK. He founded the company, ran it as a CEO until roughly Series A stage, and then he came to the board and said, I love the company, I'm committed to the job, I'm not going anywhere overnight, but let's start a conversation about hiring someone else to run the company in the future. And the way Jeff explained it later, and I go into more detail in the book, is that he said that if I didn't come to the board with this idea, then a couple of years later, the board would have come to the same realization. And by that point, it would have been a one-way conversation, Jeff, you're out. By taking charge of the process, by opening the conversation early, when there was no urgency, Jeff was able to create a dialogue, which resulted in him taking a role of an executive chair at Seedrs. And they had a very, very smooth and orderly transition to the new chief executive over the next couple of years.
Yeah. And well, you were talking earlier about the a group moving to a group CEO. Interestingly, I had somebody come and see me last week who has done that. There are now 3 individual businesses in the portfolio, I guess, that have managing directors, and he's a group CEO and has a management board. I thought that was a great structure as well, because somehow there's that, he's group CEO, so he can do M&A, he can deal with the investors, but it's clear that the managing director of each of those business units is the day-to-day operator of those businesses. And that's a great way of splitting it out.
And it's an idea that is not obvious to many founders. They might run the business and maybe there are a couple of business units and they feel like, so one founder I quote in the book is, he felt that he was trying to treat a company that could be a nice, profitable lifestyle business as a venture-backed startup. He was looking for growth, but the business was just not ready for it. It could be a good, profitable, cash positive business if only it was not reinvesting all its money into the attempts to grow. And so what he's done is he found someone to run the business, extracted himself into the group CEO role, and created another separate business unit to focus on high growth, high risk ideas, effectively having a playground for new things while ensuring that the cash generating part of the business is run as a cash generating part of the business and not as a venture backed startup.
Interestingly, we've got a client that we work with, that 2 founders. And I suppose when we started working with them, they thought, this might go from, 0 to 100 million. And it hasn't. It's got, it's not a lifestyle business. It's definitely a profitable business, but it's not going to be 100 million. Right. And so they've done the same thing. They're in the process of doing a group structure, and also from a tax perspective, creating that group structure and how do we want to manage the business? How do we want to take money from one business and then have a series of investments in other businesses? Yeah. Other than getting everyone to read your book, how do we get founders to think about this? Or do you want to do it 2 ways? Because I know you've got a book launch coming up, and we both know a number of sort of VCs in the space. Are you hoping that VCs give this to their founders and both sides are prepared to have this conversation?
Well, I hope that VCs at least put this book on the bookshelf in the office somewhere. Because giving it directly might come across as a strong hint.
Okay.
But my hope is that the tech community, the founder community, the investment community, we start having this conversation in way before it becomes urgent. That we start having conversation around what kind of a CEO will the company need in 3 years' time? Why? For example, what happened in my business is that we started in the business to consumer space, and that was my skill set. But as we evolved over the years, we moved into the business to business space. And today, most of our money comes from clients such as Google, Apple, Deloitte, Microsoft, and other big, exciting companies. But that's a very different skill set. And so we needed to, and we did find a CEO who has experience of working with large corporates, because they've got different needs, different processes, and they need a different approach. And that was not the direction in which I wanted to grow as a chief executive.
When you founded the business, what was your motivation?
Okay, it changed over time. At the very beginning, the motivation was really insecurity. I was in my late 20s and I felt like I just wouldn't amount to anything in life unless I create a successful business. I wanted to create something that I could point my finger to and say I've done it, and that's kind of validated. That would validate. But once we started training people and placing them in their first job as software developers, I realized that it's incredibly meaningful to help people change their careers. Our customers regularly describe their experience as life-changing, and that's incredible. It really matters to them. We changed the lives of over 5,000 people, And this was what's been driving me as a founder for years. And then, as I've just explained, we shifted the business model to focus on large corporates. So today, most of our revenue comes from large, mid-sized and large companies. And this required a different skill set and, frankly, a different motivation.
And at no point did you say get rich. When I look at my coaching business and I think, what do I get out of working with clients? When I look back at my corporate jobs or scaling up roles before, we were successful in generating money, but I got a real kick out of the impact that I had on the human beings whose lives I changed by giving them jobs and amazing careers. And so there's that. I've got that thread all the way through, and it feels like talking to you that you've got that same thing. It's like when this became less about helping individual people, and it was no longer that sort of B2C life changing. Actually, being the driving force behind the business didn't give you the personal satisfaction that the coaching now must. Otherwise, you'd have started another business.
Well, exactly. So that's one of the reasons why I work as a coach. It's essentially about meaningful, deep, one-to-one conversations on a regular basis. And that's, on a personal level, that's far more important to me than sitting in front of a spreadsheet that has very impressive numbers, but I'm 3 degrees removed from the actual impact that we're having on individual lives.
Oh, God, what's the name of his book? I was listening to a book at the weekend, Arthur C. Brooks, who's a professor in happiness at Harvard. And he said, interestingly, your brain changes. And so at the beginning of your life, you're amazing at solving problems. And as you get older, you're great at teaching. And so satisfaction, you get satisfaction from different things. So also you get wisdom, and then passing on that wisdom becomes more meaningful for people often. So what, thinking about the mindset of founders and CEOs, do you have a sense of what proportion of founders get removed, and what's the current state of play and where you think it should be or might be?
It's difficult. It's genuinely difficult to say because the situations when a founder is forcibly removed, when the board fires them and tells them to get out of the building against their wishes, these are very rare. At the same time, what happens a bit more often is investors sit down with the founder and say, we don't want to fire you on the spot, but things are not going as well. So maybe we should start a conversation about other options. What do you think about? And the founder may well agree and say, okay, I'm not going to fight or resist. I'm going to collaborate in this situation. Does it count as investors firing the CEO? Maybe, maybe not. So this is where it gets slightly blurry.
Either way, they are conversations that have initiated by the investors and not by the CEO.
There are.
Yeah.
And likewise, there are conversations initiated by the founders.
Yeah.
Sometimes founders start the conversation really early, coming to the board and saying, I love the company, but my aspiration is to build 5 companies over my career. And I want to get this company to a certain point and then trust it to someone else. And this may happen years before the founder chooses to step down. And sometimes founders come to the board with a solution in mind. As in, I decided to step down, here's how it's going to work, and here are the next steps.
And I think I would suspect that if you have that conversation early, then actually probably fewer of them end up stepping down or leaving because you've just got a genuine conversation. And if the investors are supportive and there's an open conversation, then you probably find ways to plug the gaps, get the CEO to do work that they enjoy, that they're genuinely exceptionally good at, and backfill all the stuff that's not them.
Exactly. It opens the conversation about what's possible. Because the alternative is that the founder CEO continues to be in sales mode at all times, pretending to the board that everything is fine, everything is under control, they've got a plan, and they've got everything covered. Yeah, I can see you laughing. You know what it's like.
Well, yes. Look, presenting information to the board. So even if whether they're sort of in presenting it to the board or the investors, that all the time, that, what should we share? What shouldn't we share? How much of the truth do we tell the board? Well, in some boards are more supportive than others. Some boards are absolutely, they understand that it can be chaotic and they're fine. And others seem to are complicit in this presentation of information that suggests that something's running perfectly when it's not.
Yeah. And on this note, I wanted to highlight the role of a chair of the board. A chair of the board can be absolutely instrumental in the process if they are well respected by everyone on the board and they've got a trusted relationship with the founder CEO, which enables the founder to sit down with the chair and say, this is how it's actually going. This is how I feel. I may not be ready to replace myself as a CEO for 3 years, and maybe I will stay even forever. But this is what's really going on for me right now. And this enables the board to approach the topic without any rush, which, by the way, is another point that founders often underestimate. A CEO succession in startups takes time. It can easily take a year, if not more. Trying to do it in less than half a year is probably unwise. It will be very rushed.
Well, also you can't do it until you've reached a certain critical mass, because you're working 60 hours a week, not paying yourself any money, driving potential long-term equity value. You move sideways. We've got to put somebody in who are now going to have to pay real money to do 40 hours a week. Totally different.
Yeah, exactly. So you need to get the company to a certain point when the company is ready. You need to find a successor, arrange a smooth transition. So there are lots of moving points. So really, the entire process takes between 1 and 2 years.
Yes, and
so
the investors will be nervous as hell.
Yes, and that's why the conversation about how are we going to approach it needs to start when the founder is still committed to running it for another year or two, which means sufficiently early. And the mistake that I see founders make is that they delay the conversation until they wake up on Monday morning and they realize I need to be out of here by the end of the month or I go crazy. And that's like 2 years too late.
Yeah. And so what have you've got some good examples and some bad examples in the people you chatted to. You were talking earlier about the guy at Cedars who stepped up to be group CEO. What or executive chair. What else have you got that's sort of that you've seen that you thought, oh, that was really well done?
Well, I don't want to toot my own horn too much, but one of the examples I give in the book is my own CEO transition, because part of the experience is...
If you can't say you did a great job, who else is going to do that?
Yeah.
Go on.
So when I look back at how we orchestrated the CEO transition from me to Claudia Harris, who runs the business right now, I think we've done it really, really well. We took our time. It took about 14 months between me sitting down with Claudia and saying that we should probably start looking for a new CEO, and Claudia taking over as a new chief executive. And by the way, here is an interesting detail. At the time, Claudia was my chair, and I effectively hired her as a CEO from a chair position, which was not the original plan, but that's how it worked out, and it worked out incredibly well. But my point is that we really took time. I spoke to my chair when I was still ready to keep running the business for as long as it takes, and I had conversations with Claudia about the potential CEO succession. I think at least 2 years before that. So it was open as a topic. We were talking about it years before I actually stepped down as a potential possibility. And this enabled us to discuss possible options, and when the time was right, execute it very, very smoothly, which was not a given because we did it in 2020, the first year of the pandemic. Which was a challenging year for the business. So it created some complications, but despite this, we took the company through the CEO transition in a very smooth way.
I mean, you would historically have delivered all of that training on-prem in London. And how did the business transition that to, how did it go when you moved it online?
So when the country went into the lockdown in March 2020, we shifted all our operations online. So basically everything moved to Zoom in a matter of days. At the same time, we executed a number of cuts. We reduced the team by about 25% because we're very nervous about the impact on the economy. And in particular, we make money by placing software developers. And in 2020, when coronavirus hit, everyone stopped, like the entire country, literally, everyone stopped hiring junior software developers. And the trouble with that was that we had a brand promise to refund our students if they can't get a job. Because we're so confident in the quality of our training, we always said, you pay us money, you can't get a job, we'll refund you. And historically, only a tiny proportion of people were ever refunded. So it was not a financial consideration at all. It was not expensive. But when coronavirus hit,
and you didn't have a force majeure in your contract.
No, there was no force majeure. So basically, the liability ballooned overnight.
Yeah.
And at the time, we found ourselves between two difficult choices: either we default on our liability to the students, on our brand promise, and that would be devastating for obvious reasons, or we run out of money and just close the entire business, and that would also be devastating for different reasons. And as we were navigating this choice, we were also in the final months of the CEO transition. I was handing over to Claudia as we were trying to figure out how to make sure that the business survives in the context of the pandemic. So it was quite a bit of fun, or rather, it looks fun with the benefit of hindsight. But in the moment, it was a good challenge for both of us.
And when you spoke to the CEOs, did you only speak to people where it had gone well, or did you also talk to people where it had gone badly and said, what would you have done differently?
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, there is in the book, one of the examples I give is of a founder. She prefers to stay anonymous, so let's call her Alex. She raised money for her startup, and with the benefit of hindsight, she says that she raised a little bit too early. So the company didn't grow as fast as what she promised to investors. At that point, investors effectively panicked and told her that they are only going to authorize further and offer further investment on the condition that she steps down as a CEO and they install their own CEO. She, as the founder CEO, disagreed with the choice of the investors, but she felt like she didn't have a choice because the company was running out of money and she couldn't fundraise without the authorization of the existing investors. And so she accepted the terms, and 6 months later, that CEO quit. The investors hired another person, and unsurprisingly, another year later, the company was effectively destroyed.
Yeah.
It was a lose-lose situation for everyone involved, for founders, investors, clients, the team. And yes, with the benefit of hindsight, maybe Alex says that she raised too early. Maybe she raised from the investors who were not fully comfortable with the risk. But also, it's fair to say that when the company found itself in a difficult position, the investment firm chose to take a very aggressive position and force the founder CEO out. Instead of backing the founder that they chose to invest in.
You just see it all the time in football teams. You know, we've got a manager and we're failing, so we hire another manager and it doesn't fix it, and hire another manager and it doesn't fix it. We hire another manager and it doesn't fix it. It's just recruitment. It's hard, and often there are other reasons why it's not just a change of leadership.
It's hard. It's difficult to replace the CEO. It's difficult to find exactly the right person for your business. It takes time.
So, Startup CEO Succession is your book, and do you think succession, it covers, there's broad enough in there that, you know, if you're not a founder CEO, for example, if you're, I don't know, senior person in any business, do you think there's enough parallels in there that you could go, okay, I could have this, I could use this book as a guide to have a conversation about replacing myself?
Yes, there are enough parallels because the book outlines the journey from thinking about stepping down in the first place, all the way to figuring out what to do next. And the steps on this journey, they are universal to any transition. So there are effectively 9 steps. The book is organized around a framework from 1 to 9, starting with understanding why you started the business in the first place or why you got this job in the first place, where it all started. So looking inside your own motivation, then facing your fears. There are always lots of fears. What if I'm not a founder? Will I be able to raise money? How will I make money? What will others think about me? So it's important to understand and work through those fears. But then there are specific practical circumstances. What does the company need? What is your skill set? What is your performance? So that's also a universal question. And from there, you can make a decision either way and make a decision you're confident in. And if you do decide to step down, you almost always, it's a good idea to take charge of the process and drive it instead of waiting until the board wakes up to the realization that the CEO needs to be replaced. And once you start the conversation with the board, you can choose a successor, figure out how to do the transition, rest, recover, and figure out what's the next stage of your career is going to be.
In a few words, what drives you every day?
The desire to help other people. I really get a kick out of seeing the impact on specific individuals that I have a chance to support.
What do you think your genius is?
I think I can combine very different perspectives from different fields. My experience as an entrepreneur, my training as a software developer, studying computer science, my training in meditation, my interest in psychology training as a coach. So all these things all these parts of my skills that come from different fields. And I do my best to combine them in a skillful way.
What unpopular opinion do you hold?
I'm quite persuaded that free will is a complete illusion, that free will doesn't exist.
Okay. So what?
And I suspect it's unpopular.
Okay, excellent. That might be that might be a topic for another entire podcast. What's the most significant risk you've taken in your career?
I think it's actually switching my career to become a coach, because 4 years ago, when I was stepping down as a CEO, I was in a really good position to start another company, raise more money, a repeat founder with experience of entrepreneurship. So there were lots of components to go and try to build another startup, including my background in technology and software development. It was really tempting to do something like venture backed with it. And the risk was to follow my calling and do what I feel like I really should be doing, instead of what I think I could be doing.
How do you measure success in life?
Someone said that success in life is about house full of love and having slow mornings and quiet mind and good health. So all things like this. If I'm healthy, if I've got nice, loving relationships in my life, if my mind is reasonably quiet, if I'm not in a rush all the time, that sounds like success to me. And I'm not quite living up to there. Sometimes, like for example, this week is crazy busy for me because of the book launch. My mind is not exactly quiet because there is just so much going on right now. But that's desperation.
What's the most recent thing you've learned, or the most recent skill you've acquired?
Playing chess. I started playing chess last year, and I'm absolutely not a professional by any means, but I really like it. It's becoming a hobby. I'm playing more and more often against the computer, learning various strategies, and it's just a lot of fun. I wish I just started doing it earlier.
Thinking about your eulogy, what do you want to be remembered for?
For being a positive difference to other people's lives. If a lot of people look back and say, yes, coming across Evgeny or doing something together or just having Evgeny in my life was an important and meaningful part of it.
Very good. And what's the worst business advice you've ever received?
I don't remember. Probably because it wasn't so great.
What is your biggest source of inspiration?
Books. I love reading books. I always read several books at the same time from different fields, different disciplines, from philosophy to spirituality.
What have you read recently that had an impact that you think people should read?
The book called Words of Wisdom by Ram Dass. It's a collection of quotes from Ram Dass, who was an incredible spiritual teacher. He passed away a few years ago. His book, Words of Wisdom, is just incredible.
Very good. Evgeny, it's been an absolute pleasure catching up with you again and getting you back on the show after 300 episodes. So thank you, and good luck with the book launch this week.
Thank you so much.